everyone, my name is Emily Wu, and I am a Taiwanese American hosting The Emily Show at LA Thousand Win TV platform. On this show, I'm going to be introducing you to people from all walks of life to bring you news and stories that you normally won't find in the mainstream media. So today, I have a very special guest who has taken his career from international affairs to filmmaking and acting. Because of his recent film, Formosa Betrayed, it has raised my awareness about the history of Taiwan and how it has affected the Taiwanese American community today. So I'm happy to present Will Tiao.
Hello.
Hi, Will. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. So thank you for being here today with us. And Will, you've mentioned in many interviews that you were born in Kansas. What brought you to, what brought your parents to Kansas, and what was it like growing up there?
Well, my parents are originally from Kaohsiung, Taiwan, and my father was a graduate student at Kansas State University and eventually became a professor there. And actually in Taiwanese circles, in certain Taiwanese circles, Kansas State University is known as the Military College of Taiwan Independence because so many Taiwanese immigrants came to Kansas State at one point or another. And in my travels, I've visited Taiwanese American communities across the country, across the world actually. And always, I often find someone who's graduated from Kansas State. And so that's how we ended up there. I'm actually born and raised, as you mentioned, in Kansas. And my parents are still there today.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. So, so while you were in Kansas, when did you start learning more about your Taiwanese background and Taiwan's political history then?
This is something I've pretty much known since I was a kid. My parents, first of all, growing up in Kansas, obviously, even though it was a Taiwanese community there, it's still fairly small, and you're pretty much surrounded primarily by Middle America. And so already you kind of already notice you're different than pretty much everyone else. But beyond that, my parents were always very proud of being Taiwanese, and they always told me and my sister growing up that we needed to call ourselves Taiwanese and not Chinese. And I didn't know what that meant, obviously, growing up as a kid, as an American.
Right.
But as I grew older, it became very apparent to me that my parents explained to us the political situation, which was at the time in Taiwan in the 70s and 80s. Taiwan was under martial law. And there was a one-party state ruled by what's known as the Kuomintang, the KMT. And at the time, my parents, it was actually illegal to call yourself Taiwanese. The government encouraged everyone to call themselves Chinese because the eventual goal was to go back to China. And my parents were not part of that movement. My parents were part of a different movement, a democracy movement and an independence movement to call themselves Taiwanese and to be democratically ruled under Taiwan. And my parents made that very clear to me and my sister. They joined the Taiwanese student organization at Kansas State University, and they were involved in Taiwanese cultural activities throughout the country. What I found out, though, as I got older, was that my parents did this at great risk and at great peril to their safety and to their family's safety back in Taiwan, because it turns out that my father was eventually put on a blacklist. He was basically not allowed to go back to Taiwan for a while because he found himself involved in these kind of cultural Taiwanese activities.
So your father was a Taiwan dissident? In
a way, yes. But what's interesting in our case, in my family's case, is my father, although he was very, he was involved in these cultural organizations, but he was never someone who was like, how should we say, in Taiwanese, I guess one would say a big potato.
Oh,
My father
okay.
was never a major, and he would admit this himself. He was never someone who was the president of the organization or even the vice president, or but
So he didn't stand out.
he didn't stand out by any means, but yet he was targeted.
By affiliation.
By affiliation. And that was what was interesting, what I always grew up being very aware of, is that no matter how small of a potato you were, that basically you could find yourself under the firing line. And my parents were very clear. They said, if someone answers the phone in Chinese, hang up, because we don't speak to anyone who speaks Chinese. We only speak Taiwanese to our friends. And
When did they say that to you?
oh, they said that to me since I was 5 years old.
Wow.
So I've known about this stuff since I was a kid. And so this is just something that's very, so when you ask me, when did I begin to learn? I've known this stuff literally since I was born. It was just, something to be very careful about what you said. And sure enough, when we went back to Taiwan, when we were eventually let back into Taiwan, we were followed. And my parents were very concerned for our safety. And so it was just something that always stuck in my head, and definitely, obviously, was very different than the experience of my American friends who were growing up. And I eventually pursued a career in politics. My background is in politics, and I have a bachelor's and master's in international affairs. And one of the things that I always did was I focused on issues concerning Taiwan. Taiwan, China, and the United States, because of this kind of identity formation that I grew up with, both as a Taiwanese American and as an Asian American.
So it was your parents who prompted you to go into this career?
Actually, no. My parents didn't prompt me to go into the
no?
career. No, not at all. I think my parents would have liked me to do what most Asian kids do, which is be a doctor or be a lawyer or something, very. But to be fair to my parents were very were always allowed my sister and I to pursue what we really felt was best. And I actually started off as a music major, but I then I then realized I couldn't make it as a musician, so then I switched to political science and international relations. And I had always had a passion for it. It was something I had always had a passion for American politics as well. And so it was just something, I ended up working in Washington, D.C. For actually, and my first internship was for the Formosan Association for Public Affairs, FAPA. And
how long ago was that?
a long time ago. Long enough that Lee Teng-hui was president of Taiwan. And it was back at a time when Taiwan was not yet, well, it was the first time that Taiwan was trying to get back into the United Nations since it had been kicked out in 1976 or in the mid-70s when China took over the China seat on the Security Council, and the Republic of China, led by the Kuomintang and Chiang Kai-shek, they were brought out the UN. And then at this time, this was in the early to mid-90s, I was my job was to lobby to get Taiwan back into the United Nations, but under the name of Taiwan. And I literally went door to door to over 300 congressmen and senators' offices, and I learned how, you often have very little time with these people on Capitol Hill. Usually you're meeting not with the senator themselves or the congressman, you're meeting with an assistant. And when you do, you have like maybe 5 minutes, maybe. So I actually brought along this book. I was given this book called Formosa Betrayed. And I would give them this book, and I would explain to them what we were there to do, which was to lobby and to explain to them why Taiwan was important. So I became very, how should I put it?
Succinct.
Very succinct, very skilled at pitching Taiwan, pitching Taiwan, its history, its issues, often in 5 minutes or less. That's because that's all the time I had.
Right.